I'm old enough to to have seen digital before it was called digital, right? So the rise of the Internet of Information with all its potential and possibilities, and how exciting it was to be able to type in this little box called Google and all of this information comes up, and the potential on education, access to books and libraries, and the consequences around IP2. Um, 4 years ago, I came across the concept of the Internet of Value. And it gave me that fuzzy feeling of looking at something that had true potential to change the world. So much so that it was one of the reasons I left my job to jump into it and learn a little bit more about it. And today I would like to share some of that with you. What we're going to do today is first talk a little bit about the status of privacy and identity as it is today. Then we are going to go through a brief introduction on what blockchain is, and then we are going to talk about the possibilities of this platform, particularly when it comes to three topics: identity, privacy, and advertising. Now, some of these topics, particularly around identity, have so much potential, but they're still quite far away in terms of potential implementation. But what we're going to see after our keynote is Cameron coming in and talking about what's happening right now in Australia, led by the Auspost in terms of identity and identity management. Okay? So let's talk about the sorry state of privacy, and it's a very, very sorry state. 10 years ago, when I used to think about privacy and the threats to privacy, I always saw it from two different lenses. One lens was government, surveillance, and that was about, under the guise of security, rightly or wrongly. On the other side, we were starting to see the advertising, the personalization, the targeting, but these felt 10 years ago like two different things. And then in 2011, the wonderful Eli Pariser wrote a book and published a book called The Filter Bubble, where he started to raise the concerns that the algorithms that orchestrate our ads are starting to orchestrate our lives. And he talked about social media, the bubbles that started to divide us into our own little world where we wouldn't come out, and it was self-referential. Things started to escalate, and the concern started to evolve into journalism specifically. How social media, how some of the new media that was coming in was starting to impact significantly journalism. And Catherine Viner wrote this great article in 2016 called How Technology Disrupted the Truth at The Guardian. And she talked about how the consequences of what was happening was going beyond journalism. What happened next will blow your mind. 87 million users affected by the Facebook data breach. Objective election interference. I stopped seeing these threats as different things and realizing that we were moving into a world where perhaps, I hope not, it's becoming the end of privacy. And I hope we can do something about it. Why is that? What is changing in the dynamics? Certainly everybody's using the algorithms that we've used in advertising for other things. But most importantly, the business models are changing. We are moving from business models that were focused on products and services to business models that are focusing on data. And of course, Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook with your money is nice, but tell me about your data. What we need to know is that the data we capture is always at risk. The biggest, most secure companies in the world are getting hacked on a daily basis, right? No data is secure. And regulation is absolutely here to stay. Tomorrow, it comes into effect, the GDPR, and the penalties are heavy, 20 million or 4% of the global annual turnover. What is the GDPR asking for? Privacy by design, And interestingly enough, the GDPR and the Me Too movement seem to have a lot in common. They are asking for continuous consent is necessary and can be drawn at any time and just in time without any friction or complexity. That's what is at stake. And there's consumer backlash. We are seeing it every day. Consumers are adopting ad blockers, VPNs, cryptocurrency, blockchain, and certainly these days, when I engage in the internet and someone asks me for my data, I tend to act like this guy.
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about the state of identity. Your identity is usually perceived in the eyes of some organization that needs to verify you, right? The digital identity is not being designed for your needs. That means that identity is being really fragmented, that we have hundreds of online personas stored in all of these different places, and updating an address is really, really hard. We also have an ever-expanding digital identity and what it means. Before, it was a name, an address, and date of birth. Now we have biometrics, values and behaviors, preferences, and buying patterns, professional experiences, licenses. And if you want to go to the frontier of what's happening with identity, follow genomic and health data, the new frontier for individual profiling and fortune telling. A couple of things that are important, verifiable claims. A lot of our engagement with people, with organizations, we need to verify things like our name, our date of birth, what kind of degrees do we have, etc. Claims are important. And we now have new trust indicators, rates and reviews from Amazon and Uber, etc., and social media likes and platforms. We are moving to the click and gig economies. We are moving beyond, say, social status to net worth, okay? We are moving into the world and the birth of the internet of value. Before I talk about blockchain and Bitcoin, I just want to say that some things are out of scope. I'm not going to give you financial advice. I don't know about the best wallets these days. The identity of Satoshi Nakamoto, I don't know either, sorry. What I'm here to talk about is the potential of the platform. The birth of Bitcoin. Let's talk about this for a second. Bitcoin attempts to solves a particular problem called the double spending problem. When I pay with cash, the money leaves my hands and I can spend it again. Now, when it comes to digital exchanges, if we are doing an online transfer, a credit card payment, or an e-commerce payment, things get a little bit more complicated. You need these financial intermediaries, such as banks and clearinghouses, that perform several things. They verify you, and they update ledgers. They know who has money, who has the money. Now, what happens is most brokers extract more value than they produce, so there's a lot of fees involved. And Bitcoin solved that problem with two different things, decentralization and cryptocurrency, cryptography. What is this decentralization? Instead of centralized brokers, we are using a public distributed ledger running on a network of computers, okay? And each peer-to-peer transaction is going to be stored and duplicated across all of these computers, which makes it immutable. And that is an important property of the blockchain, which ensures that there's not fraud involved because it's there stored across all of these computers. Encryption, it's by nature private and secure. You need a private key to unlock the information that is stored on the blockchain. Blockchain, the technology, runs much more than cryptocurrency, much more. It allows not only currency, but it supports any exchange of value, whether it's money, goods, property, work, or even votes. And in terms of disintermediation, It's not just financial institutions, it allows the disintermediation of any trust provider, okay? So the Vitalik Buterin, the guy that invented Ethereum, has this interesting quote. It says that instead of putting the taxi driver out of a job, blockchain puts Uber out of a job and lets the drivers work with the customer directly. I have to say, we have brokers working to automate workers. We have the blockchain working to automate brokers. Perhaps we should just give up, put our tools down, go and have a party and let the machines take over, because it seems to be where we are going. Now, the reality is the tension around the blockchain is driving good change. What's happening is it's pumping new life in the enterprise. We have the enterprise adopting blockchain to try to reduce some of the costs, some of the waste, to improve the supply chain, and to also look at new business models. Look at just from the financial services sector, you're seeing all banks pretty much adopting and trialing blockchain, and our own ASX doing amazing work in this space. Now, we talked about identity and the state of identity. I wanted to spend a couple of slides quickly talking about how the blockchain can really help us manage our identity better. We are going from a fragmented identity to something that could look like this, where institutions issue and verify claims, where we accept and reject and share claims. The information is stored in the blockchain, but only we can unlock it based on our private key. So an interesting concept. And again, it's about persistency, it's about peer-to-peer, just-in-time portable, so really good stuff that could happen in this space. Interoperability is absolutely key, so it's going to take some time for this to come to life. Having said that, there is a foundation working at it, and if you look at the organizations that are part of it, we know that there's a great chance that in a few years we start having some infrastructure around managing identity. And if we talked about identity, this expanded version of identity that now includes our data, who we are, our behaviors, it's not a big leap to think about marketing and where marketing is going, permission-based marketing and advertising, right? We know that we have problems with ad fraud. 56% of all display ad dollars were lost last year, 2016, in fraud. So it's significant, the amount of money that we are spending. Fragmented experiences, 94% of marketers don't have a single view of customer. There is spam, and not the kind that comes in a can. And of course, blockchain-based advertising can really be helpful for the advertising supply chain, transparency, responsible content, accountability, all good things for us to instill in our marketing and advertising. Now, for the ad tech world, it's not fast enough yet. The type of transaction speeds that we need to run the ad tech ecosystem, blockchain is not there yet, but there's many good people working on it. And I think at some point in time, it will happen. So what if brands could engage in meaningful, consensual, and distinct connections at the right place and time? What if the ad dollars that we are currently spending on brokers could be used to reward prospects' time and customer loyalty directly? A connection between brands and potential prospects directly. And do we need the blockchain for that? Perhaps we don't. Perhaps we can do it right now.
But what if there was a way that you could own and control this data? An avatar, perhaps, that sweeps up all your data and stores it safely in a global network that is not owned and controlled by any large entity. A network where your data is encrypted securely and you are the only one who has the keys. A network where you decide whom to share with and under what terms. And this is a wonderful thing because it protects your privacy and rewards you for what is yours. Let's get data back under our control, where we can own our virtual self and manage it responsibly.
This is incredibly difficult to implement. At the moment, it's just a dream, right? There's many startups that are claiming it, but the idea is there. The consumer starts demanding it, and we need to start thinking about if these things are in the minds of our consumers, how can we engage with it now in a way that leads to a more transparent engagement in marketing advertising? So what does this mean to your business? When it comes to blockchain, assess. These things are nascent, so we need to just look at what's coming. The New South Wales University has an interesting blockchain-based rewards program, loyalty program that you might want to look at. Permission-based engagement is the future of marketing, so you should be looking at that. But when it comes to the blockchain, for now, just assess. We are at a crossroads today. We have access to amazing technology. Today you saw many different potentials, so from AI to 5G and IoT to blockchain. Now, we also learned that when it comes to computers, what they are good at right now is on the what, categories, etc. We humans still absolutely own the why and the so what. Purpose, meaning where we are heading, we are still in control. Ali Pariser was the inductee for the Southwest Interactive Hall of Fame. In his speech, he started by saying that technology is not the underdog anymore. So it's time to act like it. We need to be responsible and accountable. I personally, like all of you, want to continue to keep my freedom and my independent will. And so does the rest of your customers that you engage to every day. So let's act now. Let's ensure that we are placing customer experience at the center of our strategy and our execution. And let's ensure that trust is at the center of our customer experience. Thank you so much.